I wrote Open Leadership because I had written my previous book, Groundswell, around how organizations can use social technologies. And as I was going around and talking to them about the book, people kept asking me, okay, I can do all these things, but there's this one small issue. I'm having a really hard time giving up control, giving up this need to be in control of everything. How open do I need to be? Which on the surface, if you're in the space, sounds kind of silly. But if you think about it, it's actually a really good question, because how open do you need to be? You can't be completely open. You can't be completely transparent. So if you're a leader, you're an executive, you're running an organization, how open do you need to be to accomplish what you need to get done? So it's interesting, when you think about a nonprofit or a public organization, they have different criteria because when it comes to being open. First of all, the mission of the organization is very different. It serves a public need, a public good that other people are very vested in. So they own a piece of it, more so than even just shareholders. So the imperative of being open to the public, your constituents, who basically you were chosen to lead by them, or they were given your trust to lead them. That openness becomes an essential part of that relationship you're trying to build with them. And it's not just that you got elected or you got appointed, good luck and we trust you completely. It's really about how do you actually have actually fulfilled the responsibilities of that trust that they've given you. Which is very different than if you're an executive, because in many ways, if you're an employee at an organization, or if you're a customer, you choose to be there, this contract, you're there to make a living, or you bought a product. And so it's a very clear contract of the information you need around a very particular product or service or an employment term. And this one, there's a much more emotional bond and need, in many ways, that covenant that you've made. When you look at a crisis situation, the traditional way of managing a crisis is to manage it. And that means damping it down, managing the message that goes out, people are consistent about it. When you're talking about crises today, though, they're very hard to manage, especially if it impacts a lot of people, because they're experiencing it at a very personal level. And their message, their voice is all garnered together, overwhelm yours. So if you're trying to message out to people through press releases that don't connect to those people who want to hear from you as an organization, trying to manage a crisis, it's going to ring hollow. It's not going to feel authentic. You're not really talking to me as somebody who's living in the community that is just waiting for this oil spill to show up on my doorstep. How dare you talk to me in a press release? I want to hear from you. Say, tell me as a person whose livelihood has been ruined, tell me you're sorry. So if you think about the need for the communication here, it isn't about BP's need to manage a crisis. You look at it from the person who has been impacted by it, somebody who wants to file a claim, somebody who just cares because they just want to see the oil well capped. What do they want to hear? And how do they want to hear it? So it's a very different imperative. You can't manage a disaster. The only thing you do is to bring people together and hold them together. And this is your chance to provide leadership in this space versus trying to manage it. I think one of the important things to think about when you think about crises is to do the pre-planning. So have the people trained. I think that was a very good thing that you had training. Get the people around you. But it's also about how will you approach that crisis, because in the middle of the crisis, you're not going to be able to think. You just have to execute a plan that you've had in place. And so it's really about having that plan. I mean, granted, nobody ever expects a disaster at this stage, and they don't know how big it's going to be or what's going to happen. It's going to take 90 days, 89 days to cap it. So it's a little bit hard to, it's hard to say you weren't prepared for that. But I think, though, to have that, even if you don't have the staff, especially if you don't have the staff, to be prepared, even to take that minute to just say, well, what is it that people need to hear from me? It's not just about my position, but how am I going to approach it? How am I going to act after that initial press release that sends the information out there? What kind of continuing dialogue and relationship do I need to form with the people who need to hear from me? So communications has always been, what's the message, how do I craft it, what's the medium I send it to? But it's not usually framed in the context of a relationship with your audience. And if you think about it that way, it is the first communication, the second, the third, the fourth, the entire stream of the communication through that crisis that you're going to have to plan out and think about. I think the best preparation for this is to have that relationship in place already. So I think about someone like United. I write about them in the book. And they were just beginning to go into social media. They really hadn't executed yet. They had the plans in place. And then United Breaks Guitars hits. It's a YouTube video that went completely viral within a day. And they didn't have people around them to be able to say, yeah, it's unfortunate, but people could come up to it and say, look, we understand we're actually going to advocate for United. And United didn't have the channels ready to be able to advocate for themselves or to explain what was going on. They immediately reached out to the musician who was impacted by this, whose guitar was broken. And he also put up a video saying, hey, I talked to United, they've been very gracious about this. These are the things that changed, I really appreciate it. That all got lost in the noise. It was never amplified through United's network of relationships of strong people who really supported them. So I think in a crisis, you've got to pull in all your stops. You've got to pull in and say, help us get the message out. We have that relationship, you can trust us. Yeah, when you say something, I can trust it because you've said this before in the past to me. So I'm going to believe it much more. Yeah, there's two different ways of being open. Okay, so the first way that you're talking about being open is just taking all the data I have available and just making it available. So if you have large data sets, so for example, the Guardian newspaper in the UK has a lot of data. I think they had the expense reports of all the MPs in the British Parliament. They had a database of all the nuclear warheads and their location and their strength and trajectory. So you could type in, okay, I'm in this location, how many nuclear warheads can hit me? So they had these databases and people built things like that little app, or they did research on it because they said, why should we sit on this data? Let's make it useful to anybody. So you can make data and content as a repository available to people. The second part, though, I think is much more powerful, which is for the purposes of that relationship, what information do I need to release and really update people on and explain to people that this is what's going on, so they feel more connected, their needs are met, their goals are met, my goals are met in a very directed way. And that's going through and again, doing that thinking, taking the time to think about what are you trying to accomplish, what are they trying to accomplish, and trying to find and use that data and information that will move that forward, that relationship forward. Yeah, I think there are two issues here about being open and being free. Because one thing is about being open for the purposes of providing information out to people and the power that can come from that and the information and the relationships that form around that. The second part is I could take something that in the past required access of feeds. So for example, the MIT courses. You had to go to MIT. You had to pay them good money. And there was a barrier to be able to get to that access and information. Now when they make it free, what's the value of the MIT education now? So that calls that into question, first of all. But you can actually argue that there's more to just sitting in the courseware and understanding what that is, or a lecture or anything. There's something else about the whole process of getting an MIT degree that's really valuable. And so people are going to do that. I see content becoming more and more open and free. Newspapers, there are now newspapers that are given away completely for free and advertising supported. Online sites, all pretty much advertising supported. And even in my organization, where we do technology research, traditionally that has been behind a paywall, syndicated research. Now we put that under Creative Commons and available for people to see. The goal of that, again, is to be more open about that, open about the research and the process that we get it and who gets access to it. So many more people read it, give comment to it, make our research even better, but also provides leads back to us for advisory services. So I go back to why are you being open, the goal of why you're being open. It's not open for the sake of being open. That's just not very smart. Versus if you're going to be open for a very specific purpose, for that relationship to move things forward, and in some cases for economic gain. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's interesting. I work with a lot of organizations, and inevitably I get called in because the CEO or the managing director of a nonprofit or somebody has pounded on the table and said, we must have a Facebook strategy. We must be on Twitter. And I go, why? Why? I mean, you would never say, let's start a business just because somebody else is in that business. You just wouldn't do that. And so I step back and just realize that these are all technologies. You can do so many things with any of these technologies. Why are you doing it? And if you don't know why you're doing it, then stop. Just stop it. Because you're just going to be flailing against the wall, and at some point someone's going to say, they're going to hold you accountable and say, what am I getting out of this? Why are we putting valuable time and resources? And if you're in the public sector, if you're in the nonprofit sector, the most valuable thing you have are people. They're hard to find. Good people are hard to find. Their time is extremely valuable. You have to prioritize what they spend time on. And so if your leader comes to you and says, well, why is that person spending time on Twitter? What's the benefit of that? How does it link back to what we're trying to accomplish in the strategic goals? And any organization with its soul has a goal, has a purpose, has a mission, and make sure that everything's aligned towards that. I look at Netflix, and one of the things they do is they talk about high-performance teams. And when you have high-performing teams, in other words, people you trust to do the right thing, you have good processes that allow them to get the things done, and bad processes that are there to prevent things from going wrong. So if you anticipate that people will do the good things, those are the good structures that you want to have, the rules in place to enable good behavior. And you want to minimize the number of bad behaviors and really try not to anticipate all the bad things that happen. But you want to put in place the guardrails to be able to say, when bad things happen, these are the consequences. I think, I'll give you an example. At Microsoft, their social media policy is basically summed up as be smart and remember the confidentiality agreement that you signed. So that's it. It's kind of like, okay, I trust that you're going to have good judgment here. You're going to exercise good judgment. And in the end, you can't spell out every single thing. So I think being more restrictive sends the message saying, I really don't want you to share. I don't want you to be open. Versus saying, I think these are the reasons why we want to be open and why it's good for us, and these are the ways to do it safely, these are best practices. But remember, there are some things you have to keep in mind. Exercise good judgment. Check before sending things out if you have any questions around it. Don't do these things, because these are the small bucket of things that if you do, disaster happens. Other than that, figure it out. People kept asking me, okay, I can do all these things, but there's this one small issue. I'm having a really hard time giving up control, giving up this need to be in control of everything. How open do I need to be? Which on the surface, if you're in the space, sounds kind of silly. But if you think about it, it's actually a really good question. Because how open do you need to be? You can't be completely open. You can't be completely transparent. So if you're a leader, you're an executive, you're running an organization, how open an employee at an organization, if you're a customer, you choose to be there, this contract, you're there to make a living, or you bought a product. And so it's a very clear contract of the information you need around a very particular product or service or an employment term. And this one, there's a much more emotional bond and need, in many ways, that covenant that you've made. When you look at a crisis situation, the traditional I wrote Open Leadership because I had written my previous book, Groundswell, around how organizations can use social technologies. And as I was going around and talking to them about the book, what do you need to be to accomplish what you need to get done? So it's interesting when you think about a nonprofit or a public organization, they have different criteria because when it comes to being open. First of all, the mission of the organization is very different. It serves a public need, a public good that other people are very vested in. So they own a piece of it, more so than even just shareholders. So the imperative of being open to the public, your constituents, who basically you were chosen to lead by them, or they were given your trust to lead them. That openness becomes an essential part of that relationship you're trying to build with them. And it's not just that you got elected or you got appointed, good luck and we trust you completely. It's really about how do you actually have fulfilled the responsibilities of that trust that they've given you, which is very different than if you're an executive, because in many ways, if you're